Chennai 365, an effort by SKS in association with social, sports and cultural bodies to do good to a vibrant Chennai.
offering my most humble pranams at the lotus feet of Bhagwan. On behalf of the Sri Sati Sai Study Circle for Chartered Accountants and Finance Professionals, I have great pleasure in welcoming you all for this 12th edition of this Study Circle meetings. I recognize the presence of my beloved Guru, Sri Dr. Amarchand, formerly the Professor and Head of Department of Commerce, University of Madras, formerly the Registrar of Madras University also. He was a pioneer in initiating research on the subject of values in the Department of Commerce under the Faculty of Commerce, and has successfully guided many research scholars to get doctoral degrees on this particular subject also. I am sure that we will have the benefit of listening to him in one of these study field meetings in future. A great pleasure in welcoming you, sir. I also recognize the presence of my good friend Shiv Kumar, Chartered Accountant, who has taken the trouble of coming in spite of his not so good health. Welcome you, Shiv Kumar. The study circle is, as I told you, is almost about a year old, and the first anniversary celebrations are expected to be held sometime next month. Just as we have study circles for IAS officers and advocates, the study circle for Chartered Accountants and Finance Professionals was formed with an idea of bringing together Chartered Accountants and Finance Professionals. The Chartered Accountants in exercise with their profession, be it attestation of accounts or appearing before tax authorities, very often face the challenges of upholding values, resisting various temptations. So also the financial professionals serving in the industry face similar situations. And whenever they succumb to such situations, you must have heard about the recent scams in the corporate sector. This forum is intended as a meeting point for Chartered Accountants and Finance Professionals for exchange of individual experiences and for suggestions for the way forward. Now, as I told you, this is the 12th meeting, and we had lectures by Chartered Accountants in practice, sharing their dilemmas faced by finance professionals in industry, management consultants, company secretaries like my friend Ravi, sharing their experiences, particularly in the context of the various corporate scams which are the direct result of deterioration of personal values. Today we have with us, for a change, an academician teaching values to management students and also a researcher in corporate ethics, whose perspective on this subject is going to throw some more light in areas which may or may not have been known to us or explored or experienced by us. Professor Dr. Ilankumaran, whose biodata has already been shared along with the invitation, holds a doctorate in commerce from Pondicherry University. He is currently a professor of organizational behavior and business ethics in Great Lakes Institute of Management. With more than 3 decades of experience in teaching and research, he was also associated with various management institutions such as T.A. Pai Institute, IIM Calcutta, and so on. He has also associated himself with training corporate managers and over 5,000 corporate managers in business ethics and finance. Before I call upon Professor Ilankumaran to address, we have a very pleasant task to perform. Sri Krishna Street, who sponsors all our meetings, they have also initiated an award called Nallur Virudu, which is generally given to honor people who have contributed to society in terms of knowledge, and this award is being given in these study circle meetings. This Nallur Virudu is going to be given to today's speaker, Professor Ilankumaran. May I request my teacher, Dr. Amarchand, to do the honors, please. I request Shiv Kumar to hand over the moment. May I now request Professor Ilankumaran to address.
A very good evening to all of you. It has been a rare privilege and honor for me to address such an audience. When I received this invite through a colleague of mine, Dr. C.R. Rajan, I did not know. He said, my auditor is there and he is going to call you. You need to give a talk to chartered accountants. One of my regrets in life is I could not pursue it after my BCom. So this is way back in 1985. My father asked me just simple one question. In 3 years, will you complete CA? I said, nobody gives any guarantee. So he was so exhausted after my sister's wedding, he said, then don't do it. Then what to do? So this one door is closed. Then he said, but don't be at home. Because in any case, you don't attend afternoon classes, come home and sleep. If you are at home, you are going to sleep in the morning too. So as a stopgap arrangement, I just joined MCOM, then pursued it. I had a fortune of doing my MPhil at Islamia College, Wanembadi. That actually changed my life, changed my profession, etc. The first day I met a student of Dr. Amarchand, a well-known professor, Dr. K.S. Ramaswamy. When I met him, things changed, completely changed. And since then, I've been on the academic side only. On the very first day, he told me something. If you want to be an academic, do not have material ambition. Still, I distinctly remember that. And since that day onwards, I pursued my academic journey. And when I registered myself for a full-time PhD post my MPhil, I joined Pondicherry University. And Dr. K.S. Ramaswamy also pushed me into an area which is related to values. And he said, my guide introduced values in research, in commerce fraternity. And you have a potential, you can do that. And his teacher is sitting here. I'm doubly honored, humbled to in front of, speaking to, in front of Dr. Amarchand. And my journey started there, and then finally I ended up, Great Lakes Institute of Management some 8 years ago. 2012 I joined Great Lakes. Prior to that, I also worked for about a decade at the center called Management Center for Human Values at IIM Calcutta. This center was founded by a finance professor who was also first rank holder in 1961 in cost accounting. Then he went abroad to do his PhD and then joined IIM Calcutta as professor in the area of finance and control. Somewhere late 70s, he just gravitated towards values, and he just wrote many books, and his books were introduced by respected Professor Dr. Amarchand here in Tamil Nadu, in Chennai. And since then, I also referred his book for my PhD work. At that time, the center was not there. Later on, he started a center at IIM Calcutta. I did not know about it. And after a couple of years, sometime in 95, I saw a small advertisement in Hindu asking for research fellow at this center. I knew about Dr. S.K. Chakrabarty. I read all his books. So I applied, and I was invited for the interview sometime in 95 December. And I just went with only one single purpose. I read the books of this person. I wanted to see him in flesh and blood. So that was the idea basically. So I booked my tickets and then traveled. And the interview was there, presentation in the morning, interview in the afternoon. As soon as the interview was over, I was just rushing back to Howrah station to catch a train and come back. So nothing, no news after that. After a month or so, I received a letter stating that I've been selected for this. And then that was a eureka moment. First thing I did was to just call Dr. K.S. Ramaswamy and another student of Dr. Amarchand, Dr. S. Govindarajulu, and then informed them, so elated. And at that time I was assistant professor teaching in a college in Kanjipuram. And then I told my father I'm going to resign this job and going to Calcutta. He was looking for a girl. So I was an assistant professor. From assistant professor to research fellow post my PhD. He could not understand what this guy was doing. Then my professor, Dr. K.S. Ramasamy, he personally wrote a letter to my father asking him to allow me to go and join MCHV, Management Center for Human Values. That's where the journey on values started. I worked there for 10 years, and as Mr. Shekhar was introducing me, I worked in other institutes, finally at Great Lakes. Briefly about Great Lakes. Great Lakes was, as you all know, founded by Dr. Bala Balachandran, and he is affectionately called by all the students as Uncle Bala. I told Dr. Bala, you are not uncle to me. You are a grand uncle to me because you taught my professors at Annamalai University. He taught Dr. Amachand also. So that is how the journey started. He was, amazing institute. Please sometime do visit our institute. It's an amazing place. So with this, I'm sorry I'm just taken too long a time, so privileged, so humble to speak to you. I'm going to just speak on values and ethics for professional excellence. I just start with a confession. I'm not an expert, I know. I'm only a student. Of course, I worked in a center and I've also gathered some, experience. I'm not an expert or, I've not done anything great, but I'm only just giving you what I learned. I want to just present. That is the confession that I want to make. With that, I want to start off my lecture by this confession. This confession all of us know. Ramalinga Raju made. It was like riding on a tiger, not knowing how to get off without being eaten. The next day, in all newspapers, way back in 2008, when this broke out, all newspapers carried this as a front page, headlines. This was the confession given by Ramalinga Raju. We all know he started his business, and then this business grew up, Satyam Computers, and it was at that time number 4 IT company in the country. Made huge fortune, but this man suddenly writes a letter to SEBI and other people, and he made a confession like this. It was like riding on a tiger, not knowing how to get off without being eaten. So this is the contemporary confession. I know I am addressing, people who belong to this area, auditors and chartered accountants and finance professionals. So I was just looking at global accounting scandal. I'm sorry, I'm just starting with a, negative connotation. When we are talking about values and ethics, obviously, we start off with that. Sorry for my indulgence. When I was just looking at global accounting scandals, I'm going to give you a few examples. And they say this is the worst global accounting scandals at all times. At all times. So I'm just going to give you a glimpse. Enron, this happened in 2001, 74 billion. 74 billion, amazing company. And they also started in India. CEO Jeff Skilling, CFO Andrew Festo, audit firm Arthur Andersen. Worst accounting scandal of all times. Enron was topping the list. I've just chosen a few. Then 2002 WorldCom happened, 11 billion. CEO is Jeff Skilling. I'm sorry, I think CEO is a different person. It's a mistake. The same thing is coming in. Anyway, so WorldCom happened. Then 2008, Lehman Brothers, 50 billion. That's the amount. Interestingly, at that time, I was with PFI. As soon as I joined PFI, the director, Professor Nagabrahmam, he made me chairman placement. 2007, Lehman Brothers came to recruit. We, 2 students, qualified all the rounds and went up to the final round. 1 person was selected and the other one was not selected. My director called me and said, Kumaran, they have come to recruit 2 people, but 1 was selected, 1 was not selected. What is your strategy for next year? They assured us they will come the next year too. So then we started working on something. In 2008, I was just waiting. The brothers were not to be seen. 2007, they recruited for a first time Tapney, in Tapney's history, first time somebody was recruited for 18 lakhs. First time we breached that barrier. Until then the record was 9 lakhs. It was just doubled for one candidate, 18 lakhs. Everybody was excited. And the next year I prepared some 10 students, 10 best students waiting for brothers to come. Brothers were not to be seen because they are not there. Fortunately, this was taken over by Nomura, and this guy did not lose his job. He was, for quite long time, he was with Nomura, then he went to Bloomberg, and now he is on his own. Then happened Satyam. I have just taken 4. 2009, 1.5 billion. Founder is Ramlinga Raju. CFO is Srinivas Vadlamani, and auditor PwC. See, when we are just looking at these 4 examples, because it is, chartered accountants and auditing professionals and finance professionals, I'm just focusing on this. These are 4 worst accounting scandals of all time, basically. Source is accountingdegree.org. The question is, if we look at very recent Indian examples, a lot of things are coming up. Deloitte, PMC Bank. Interestingly, I was looking at the auditors, Ladawala and Co. One doesn't know whether they are qualified chartered accountants or not. Some views are coming in, and one doesn't know whether the company is, original one or not. Lot of debates are going on, conflicts are going on. Anyway, so this is 6,000. This is very, very recent, contemporary. We all have seen in the news, people are standing in long queues to withdraw money from PMC Bank, so on and so forth. Why such scams? Why such scams? That is what the question is. Why did people do such things in the first place? See, this is the very first, intriguing question. Why such scams are happening in the first place? Highly qualified people, highly qualified, highly knowledgeable. Were they starving for food? Basic question. Many of them made fortune. Many of them have very comfortable life. So given all that, why? I'm just asking, the questions, same question in different way. Was it due to their incompetency? This is something important. Is it because of my incompetency I'm just allowing something to happen? Did they do for others' well-being? Robin Hood syndrome, we call it, or charity. What drove them to indulge in such nefarious activities? I'm just, putting different questions but pointing out the same thing. Why such things in the first place? Why such thing in the first place? The imperative is values and ethics in professional roles. Why such things are happening? What for? We call it for holistic competence. Holistic is all-round competence. What are these dimensions of this holistic competence? There are 2 dimensions when we talk about holistic competence: values and skills. Unfortunately, a lot of premium is attached to skills. We are not giving enough importance to values. That could be the reason. Values, when we talk about values, it is becoming part relating to doing things right. Emphasis is given there for doing things right. When we talk about skills, doing part relating to doing things right. For instance, when we talk about generation, this generation is far, far ahead in terms of competence, in terms of the skill sets. The simple example is the mobile phones, how the small kids are using the mobile phones. I do not know many of the applications that are there in my mobile phone, but whereas my daughter can really just fix it up. They are highly, skillful, talented, competent. The skills part of it is doing things right. The values part is doing right things. The bottom line is, skills ought to be necessarily applied and filtered through the medium of values. If values are contaminated, then skills in application will emerge as manipulative and corruptive. This is what the founder of Management Center for Human Values, after seeing his, lifelong experience and all that, he had just come out. The bottom line is this: skills are there, but it must be necessarily applied and filtered through the medium of values. And corporate scams are new. They have been happening for ages. And he had studied, and he just said the bottom line is skills are there. Having served in IIM Calcutta, highly competent people entering the system, having seen them for 3 decades, he just said the bottom line. Having trained many corporates and all that, he said the bottom line is this: skills are there. We are highly skilled, highly competent people. Unfortunately, the skills need to be applied and filtered through the medium of values. The question is, if values are contaminated, what will happen to this application of skills? What will happen to application of skills? That is where he says if values are contaminated, perverted, then skills and application will emerge as manipulative and corruptive. Whenever we just see any white collar crime, the protagonist would come alive in this bottom line. All the protagonists would come alive in this bottom line because they are highly skillful, highly competent people. Unfortunately, the filter is not the right kind of filter. Values are the filter, and if that filter is contaminated, what happens is skills and application will emerge as manipulative and corruptive. Value skills matrix. Supposing if you just take 2 by 2 matrix of value skills, values strong, skills strong, values strong, skills weak, values weak, skills strong, and values weak, skills weak. The question is, if I were to recruit somebody, whom will I recruit? Whom will I recruit in my organization? The first one, the ideal state. Value strong, skill strong. What happens in reality? What happens in reality? People are only looking at skills. I am associated with a B school for many years now. When placement happens, incidentally, I was against campus placement. I was made as placement chairman. Right? So I enjoyed the 2 years, no doubt about it, the passion with which students work and all that. I enjoyed the 2 years also. But when we really just look at the recruiters, they never ask the question about how about the value system of an individual. Primarily, the interviews, everything is to identify the skill set, the competence. Of course, you can't really just measure, your value system that is there, but still, the premium is attached to the competence. My skill sets. Now there is a big thing going on business analytics, big data, all kinds of things. It is all relating to skills, right? And nobody is asking the question, what about the value system of an individual? In fact, at IIM Calcutta, we used to do a lot of programs, every month 2 programs and all that. Annual workshop also we do. One annual workshop, Professor Amachand also on his own paid the money and came and attended. He stayed there for a week because he also wanted to just, listen to Dr. S.K. Chakraborty. And he was also there along with Dr. Bhuma, who is in SIET College, and my professor, Dr. Govindra Ajula. They all came on the own, stayed 1 week at IIM Calcutta and listened to this. And likewise, we used to do a lot of corporate programs, and one program that we did for was Ambuja Cements Limited. And Ambuja Cements Limited managing director was also there as one of the participants in the very front row. He did not open his mouth. All the top management of 40 people of Ambuja Cements at that time, they had just come down to Calcutta to attend the program. I was just joined. I was also, observing the whole thing. I was not teaching at that time. I was also part of it. And I was sitting through. And after 1.5 days, Mr. Saxeria, who was the managing director and CEO at that time, after 1.5 days, he did not open his mouth. After 1.5 days, he just raised his hand and said, "Professor, now I know what I need to do. If values are there strong, everything else will be taken care of in my company." Supposing if somebody is not good at skills, There is always, ways of improving the skills. I can send him to some training programs and all that. If values are questionable, if I get that feel, now I know I shouldn't really just take that person, because we have burnt our fingers. We have seen in our company, we have burnt our fingers. After 1.5 days, he said, first thing is I'm going to look at values. Even if somebody is, lacking in skill, that doesn't mean, he was recruiting somebody who is not having any skill. Lacking some skill, I'm not going to really just bother, but I'm going to attach a lot of values, a lot of importance to values. Otherwise, things will go haywire. If skills are weak, I can train them. Unfortunately, that is what is happening. The value strong, skill strong is, the ideal state. Supposing if value is weak and skill strong, what will happen? Wall Street will collapse. Wall Street will collapse. 2008, Lehman Brothers, I was just talking to you, they were not to be seen. 2007, they came and recruited. Wall Street collapsed. Subprime crisis happened, right? So, people who are in Wall Street, who made Wall Street to collapse. Amazingly brilliant people from Ivy League business schools. With all that, subprime crisis happened. That it did not affect US alone, it just affected the entire world. It affected the entire world. The brilliance of the mind was there, but unfortunately, values are weak. Right? So that is where the problem had just come, and this is where whenever we see any big scam, those people would come alive in this. Values weak, skill strong. They are highly, highly competent people, but questionable values. Broadly, we are classifying emotions into two types. As you could see, list A and list B. What do you see in list A and what do you see in list B? List A is positive, list B is all negative. Desirable, undesirable, right? We may call it list A as human values, and Dr. S.K. Chakraborty called list B as disvalues. Positives and negatives. So why all such scams? Top of the list in list B, the disvalue. It is greed. It is greed. Unfortunately, we are not able to really just contain this greed. Greed robs a learned man of his wisdom. Greed robs a learned man of his wisdom, says the Holy Quran. Across all religions, greed was admonished. Greed robs a learned man of his wisdom. Quran does not say greed robs an unlearned man or an illiterate of his wisdom, and it says greed robs a learned man of his wisdom because of this negative emotional quality, negative value. When it is there and I'm highly competent, what happens is it drives me. It drives me a learned man. What happens is it robs a learned man of his wisdom. It robs the wisdom from a learned man. It is not, it is always said, a common man, a man on the street is not a problem in the country. Any country for that matter, it is not the masses, the problem is with classes. That is what we have been witnessing, and in that sense, Quran rightfully says, greed robs a learned man of his wisdom. It does not say greed robs an unlettered man of his wisdom. In fact, in terms of wisdom, they are far superior than a learned man. They are far, far superior when it comes to, wisdom. Unfortunately, this is what is happening. Personal transformation process, there are two things. I'm just putting this values and skills in a different, expression. First is enlightenment of reason. We celebrate. Then enrichment of emotion. What does this enlightenment of reason do? What is the role of reason? Primarily, our education is focusing on reason, logic. The cognitive ability, we say, analytical ability, we say, it is all left brain. And the entire education system is focusing on that. Very little is on the other side. Anyway, the role of reason is it generates alternatives, evaluates consequences, provides direction. It does these three things. It generates alternatives, evaluates consequences, and provides us direction which way to go. What is the role of emotion? The role of emotion is it gives the motive power or momentum for ethical action. For ethical action, the reason may not really just help. What helps us is our world of emotions. That only gives us the motive power for ethical action. That way, when we talk about values and ethics, values are deep foundation. Values are deep foundation. The question is, can't I be ethical without a very strong value system? Without a strong value system, can't I be ethical? When we talk about ethical behavior, we always say ethics when nobody is watching. Ethical behavior when nobody is watching, there is no watchdog, there is no regulator, nobody is there, but will I be ethical? Will I be ethical? So that is why we just say, yes, it is possible in some sense to be ethical without a very strong value system. When it is possible, supposing we have a strong regulator and punishments act as a deterrent. The celebrated Rajat Gupta went behind bars. Rajat Gupta, right? First man to break the glass ceiling, so to speak. Amazingly brilliant man from IIT Delhi and Harvard, and he joined McKinsey and became the CEO of McKinsey. Later on, post-retirement, he was just serving on several boards. Amazingly celebrated person, chairman of the board, Indian School of Business, and Dr. Bala and Rajat Gupta, both of them were in boards of many things and all that. Amazingly brilliant man, what happened to him? End of the day, he had to really just serve a prison term. Only the difference is it was not India, it is US, and the regulator is very strict there. However big you are, they go by things. That one thing you need to appreciate, that ethics is nothing but the visible superstructure, the manifestation, the derivative, so the functional one. So values and ethics, the deep foundation, the constitution, and the ethics is nothing but the manifestation, the visible superstructure. We all know it's a common sense. Unless we have a strong value system, the superstructure cannot really hold. The superstructure requires a very strong foundation, and values are the strong foundation. Before going to that, when we talk about this value system and ethics, the strong foundation. See, we all talk about all kinds of corruption going on in all around the country and all that. Even then, for instance, if you take IAS officers, there are some IAS officers who are amazingly honest. Amazingly honest. And there are some government officials who are amazingly honest. In most corrupt departments, you also find amazingly honest people. Personally, I know two of them. One is an IAS officer who was also interviewing me when I went to Calcutta, by name Dr. Pradeep Bhattacharya. He's an IAS officer, and he was the most transferred IAS officer of West Bengal cadre. His average tenure was anywhere between 18 months in a position. If a particular department is very bad, they will just post him there. He will just revive the department, everything will be nice, and then they will be pushing him to some other department. Amazingly honest. He was also a co-author with Dr. S.K. Chakrabarti. Both of them wrote together also. He was in the board of IIM Calcutta. Amazingly honest, brilliant man. And he was the most transferred IAS officer of West Bengal cadre. And he was senior most to just get the chief secretary's post. The government selected a person who was junior to him made him as chief secretary, and he was given us the position called additional chief secretary and posted as head of administrative training college. Additional chief secretary posted in administrative training college. Of course, I had the privilege of giving a talk there too, because Pradeep Bhattacharya interviewed me, he had seen me and all that, he invited me. Most transferred officer of West Bengal cadre. I know another person who worked, in alumnus of Annamalai University. He did his civil engineering there, and then he joined highways, Tamil Nadu highways. Absolutely honest. 2 daughters, by the time they passed out from school, class 1, they studied in 8 different schools. 8 different schools. He built a small 2 BHK house in Tanjavur. Because unfortunately, he passed away when he was in service. He reached to the level of deputy C and all that. How did he, what happened to him while he was in service? He was deputy chief engineer, went in his TVS 50, along with his wife for groceries. He was hit by a Tata Sumo, succumbed to the injuries. 2 BHK house on the outskirts of Tanjore. In the bribery market, his signature was worth 5,000 rupees. And every day he will sign at least 20 signatures. You can imagine, right? But amazingly honest, most transferred person. When he just passed away, people were standing in queue to just pay the last respect. And what he said is, when I hit the bed, I get a sound sleep. I don't have to worry about anything. If you transfer back, you transfer. You can only transfer within Tamil Nadu, not anywhere else. You don't have the power to transfer me to Sahara, so it is only within Tamil Nadu. The value system, very strong value system, most transferred, but the kind of respect that he commanded is amazing. So that way, the values foundation, strong foundation of values, and however the system is, however corrupt the system is, however the environment is, even in the most corrupt departments, people are, stand out, and they are actually amazingly honest. That we find at every level. At every level, they are highly respected people too. When it comes to workplace unethicality, we call it, there are 2 things. By and large, we have been talking about scams. We started off with that. It is all about monetary unethicality. Someone has siphoned off some money. It is all relating to money. By and large, the literature on ethics also focuses only on monetary part of it. Equally important is the other side of it, is what we call behavioral unethicality. The Western literature on ethics does not touch about behavioral unethicality, and it was S.K. Chakraborty who just brought this. Behavioral unethicality is also important. In fact, it eats into the vitals of many organizations. It eats into the vitals of many organizations, which is behavioral unethicality. There is no money involved, nothing. You can just say this company does not really just indulge in bribery. But every company, however good the company is, some kind of behavioral unethicality will always be there. When we talk about behavioral unethicality, what is it? Actions and decisions springing from envy, egotism, suspiciousness, competitive one-upmanship, deception and the like comprise behavioral unethicality. For instance, I don't take money, I don't take bribe, but behavioral unethicality is very much there in my organization. There are 3 people working under me, and one guy belongs to my own ethnic group. I want to promote him. However sophisticated the HR systems are, however sophisticated the performance rating, performance of management systems are, I can simply just rate that particular individual and justify. Because I've just taken a stand, this guy belongs to my own ethnic group or whatever, he's known to me or friend's son or whatever, I can simply just put things and then promote it. Nobody can question it. Nobody can question it. But other people knew. Other people knew about this. This is what we call, behavioral unethicality. I've just checked with many people, everybody says there's some degree of behavioral unethicality is always inherent in any organization. We can totally avoid financial monetary unethicality, but behavioral unethicality is always there. That is what we have just seen it, and this is the other dimension when we talk about ethicality. Direct unethicality, it covers those acts and decisions that are unambiguously wrong and are known by the doers to be so. Many of the scams, many of the things that we talk are direct unethicality. Ramalinga Raju knew what he was doing. It is not that he did not know. It is not because of ignorance. He knew what he was doing. We all know about it. Satyam, he started another company for his sons, Matus, on the infrastructure. And how did he derive the word Matus? Satyam, in the reverse. Everything went upside down. Everything went upside down. Satyam became Asatya. Right? So, that way things happen. Because he knew people associated with him, they knew also what they were doing. This is direct unethicality. It is not out of ignorance. Dilemma unethicality, on the other hand, is involved in situations with at least two option choices, both of which imply adverse consequences. What is this dilemma? Both imply adverse consequences. What is this dilemma unethicality? Let us just take the example, I am running a small scale unit. All my papers are clean. I pay every tax. Everything is clean. Somebody from a government official, Central Excise or GST now, whoever, he comes and asks money during Diwali. I run a small scale unit in an industrial estate, and these people usually, visit before any festival, before Diwali. A clerk comes in and says, "Sir, Diwali. If I don't pay, some notice will be issued, and I need to run around them. I need to really just work hard to really just prove that everything is intact. If I don't pay, with false allegations and all, that they can simply close down my unit. My life is at stake. I've taken bank loan. 20 people are working in my organization. Which way to go? To buy peace by way of paying a few hundred rupees, or sticking to values and then losing out everything. Which one will I do? Paying bribe is a problem, no doubt about it. But at that moment, what is at stake? Life of 20 people, my own life, my own career, bank loan is there, other people are there, so how do I take a call? This is what we call dilemma unethicality, to pay or not to pay. If I just pay few hundred rupees, no issues, no harassment, nothing. So at that point, what will I do? So this dilemma, which, action, every action will have adverse consequences. If I pay, what I'm doing is I'm just breeding to corruption. I'm just feeding to corruption. That is also there. On the other hand, if I don't pay, they are going to close down my unit. If they close down my unit, stakes are high. I can't repay to the bank. I can't pay salary to my people. Even my own, survival is a big question. What will I do? So dilemma unethicality, two option choices, to pay or not to pay, both have adverse consequences. Then this leads to this dyad, what we call perpetrator-victim dyad. This is again very important. The question is, am I a perpetrator or am I a victim? In the example that I've given about a small-scale entrepreneur, at least his papers are clean, he had not done anything, he had not cheated anybody, it is only the harassment from the other side. He is the victim, he is not a perpetrator. There is at least an excuse for a victim, but there is no excuse for a perpetrator. Having said that, on many situations, if you really just analyze, we ourselves are perpetrators. What we try to do is we try to cover under the garb of a victim. The system is corrupt. Everybody is corrupt. I jump the traffic signal and then blame the traffic cop. He is asking me money. But I am not following the rules. I am jumping the traffic signal. So this is where I am the perpetrator. What I am doing is I am trying to cover myself under the garb of a victim. Everybody is taking bribe. Without bribe, system do not work. Incidentally, we used to come up with a newsletter at and Calcutta. And this quarterly newsletter will also have a dialogue of the quarter where we used to interview people. And then we publish their interviews. After Professor Chakraborty retired, myself and another colleague of mine, we were actually doing this. And we interviewed Viren Shah. Viren Shah was at that time governor of West Bengal. We went to Raj Bhavan and then interviewed. He was also vice president of BJP at that time. Prior to that, he became governor. And Viren Shah, their family business is Mughal Steel. And Viren Shah was just giving us example. He wanted to build a farmhouse on the outskirts of Delhi. And when he wanted to build a house, the land was there to build a farmhouse. A rich person, a wealthy individual. And he wanted at that time, NDA government was there. And then he did not want to, throw his political weight and all that. He went to the sanctioning authorities and all that. They simply asked money. He said, he can't pay. He will not pay. Then the person said, if you don't do it, he followed strictly as per the norms. He just, planned his farmhouse, but they wanted some money. He asked him, I've just followed everything. There is no deviation whatsoever. We know how much deviations do happen in Delhi and all that in all the cities, particularly in Delhi. A lot of things do happen there. And he said, I'm not deviating anything. I'm following all the rules. My engineers made sure that they have not deviated. That was the instruction given. And Viren Shah was just telling, and the official was saying, I can really just pinpoint 10 or 9 whatever objections to it and see that yours will be getting delayed. And he applied 3 times. Again it got delayed. Then finally he said, I'm not going to build my farmhouse at all. I have another house, there is no need for it. There is no need for it. I do not want to feed into this corrupt system. And he said, this call I took it. This call I took because farmhouse is a luxury, it is not a compulsory thing. Let me just have it as a land. So I don't want to build a farmhouse. Though at that time his party was in power and he was vice president of the party, he said, I did not want to throw my weight around and simply said, here the perpetrator is the other side, the victim was an individual, the farmhouse was not built. Many a times these things do happen. Unfortunately, what happens is we all take cover under victimhood. That is also there. We ourselves are perpetrator in the first place, and what we do is we just cover under the guard of a victim. I start late, I reach late, put the blame on traffic jam. Right? So there was traffic jam, huge traffic jam, late to class. So that is what we do. When we talk about professional transformation, I call it RIC model. The first one is it starts with reflection. Think about reflection is nothing but slow motion action briefly. So we need to set aside some time for reflection, which we do consciously or unconsciously. We do that as part of it. Then the second one is introspection. Examination of one's own mental and emotional processes. First is slow motion action replay. Why? Why part of it? Why did I do it in a particular way? So that is what we call introspection. Correct. Then contemplation. Purpose or intention or prospect or expectation. Where do I want to go? All the three willy-nilly we all do this. We all do this, consciously or unconsciously. We are all engaging ourselves in certainly reflection. We do reflect, we do introspect, we do contemplate. Thing is for professional transformation or personal transformation, these are very, very important. I think yesterday there was a meeting with Dalai Lama's center. Academics were actually addressing audience of Chennai in Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan. And there they said, it is about ethics. Unfortunately, I went to campus, so by the time I reached it was late. I could not attend this. In today's Hindu, there is a small news item where they say, for that ethics, they also say, take it along with meditation. Take it along with meditation. That is what the message of yesterday stopped there. Meditation is nothing but, all the three things are involved in meditation. All the three things, sit quietly. What do? We reflect, we introspect, we contemplate too. So that is also the process. That is what the Dalai Lama Center professors were actually talking about yesterday. It appeared in Hindu Today. The question is it easy? One can talk about it, One can give a nice lecture, PowerPoint presentation, all these things. The question is it easy? It's extremely difficult. It is difficult. It requires certain discipline. For instance, I always say, I'm the most indisciplined guy. So talk about all these things, I'm not a disciplined guy. Anyway, in the sense that I don't think that I'm indulging in all kinds of things. Not that way, in terms of doing things and all that. Interestingly, when I just saw in a different context, it's difficult for those who are upholding values. Before we started this, Mr. Shekhar was talking about, we face a lot of challenges in upholding values. That is what he said in the introductory speech also. Challenges in upholding values. It's not easy. It's not easy. One requires a lot of courage too. Some people lose their life too. For instance, Satyendra Dubey, alumnus of an IIT, he was killed by the mafia. When he was just building this quadrilateral project, infrastructure project during NDA time, and this man was killed because he was honest. He was actually fighting against mafia in Bihar and then he was just killed. Manjunath, young grad from IIM Lucknow, he was killed by oil mafia in Lucknow. After that only we had the whistleblower policy and all that. Anyway, it's very difficult, it requires a lot of courage, a lot of sacrifices too. You may not get promoted, you may not get the kind of business that you want, all kinds of things will happen. Difficulties are for the strong. To make them stronger, persevere, you will conquer. To the mother of Aurobindo Ashram, one of the devotees, he went and asked, why all the difficulties are for me? In that context, he said this, I'm just bringing that particular quote for this context. It's difficult and it is for the strong to make them stronger. Emphasis is mine, persevere. Persevere, you will conquer. We need to persevere if you want to really just follow the path of values. It requires enormous amount of courage, it requires enormous amount of sacrifice too. It leads to a lot of sacrifices too, and we need to persevere. Things will not open. Things will not happen. Doors will not open. All the things we need to try again. So that is where to persevere. That is why I just emphasize that particular word. Mother of Sri Aurobindo Ashram said in a different context, which is suitable here too. We started off with a contemporary confession. Now I'm just going to a historical confession. Janami dharmam nachami prakriti, janami adharmam nachami nivritti. You must be knowing who made this confession. I'm just translating. I know what is dharma, but could not practice it. I know what is adharma, but could not get out of it. Duryodhana, at the end of Mahabharata, he makes this confession. We all know he is also a learned person. He also was groomed by the same guru as that of Arjuna. We know about that. He is also a learned person, no doubt about it. And he makes this confession. I know what is right. I know what is dharma, but I could not practice it. I know what is adharma, but I could not restrain myself from doing it. I could not really just get out of it. This is historical confession. We started with Ramalinga Raju's confession. When Ramalinga Raju said, he was riding on a tiger, I always ask this question. Who created the tiger in the first place? Who created this tiger? Who asked you to ride on a tiger? As far as our knowledge goes, normal human beings cannot ride on a tiger. It is only Lord Ayyappa who can ride on a tiger. Not everybody has, right? So it is confession was honest confession. Honest confession, no doubt about it. Riding on a tiger, the question is, who created this tiger in the first place? That is the question. Then making a confession and all that is fine, fair enough. Who created the tiger? Here, the point is, Duryodhana was not able to, he knows what is dharma, he knows what is adharma, but the thing is he was not able to practice it. And he knows what is adharma. What he was doing was not right, he knew about it. Only thing is he could not get out of it. I call it Duryodhana syndrome. I call it Duryodhana syndrome. People are afflicted with Duryodhana syndrome. Whenever I see any corporate scam, big scam and all that, simple thing is Duryodhana syndrome. They knew what they were doing. It is not that they did not know. They could not resist. They could not resist. Think about the CFO. I always, look at when I was just reading, when I read about the background of the CFO of Satyam Computers, Srinivas, from a very modest background, worked hard, became a chartered accountant, became a CFO of a company. Think about the kind of difficulties he had to go through. His family, the disgrace. Had he said no to his boss, what would have happened? For a chartered accountant, getting another job is not very difficult. What Ramalinga Raju would have fired him? The worst scenario. He could have resigned and got a job elsewhere. Unfortunately, he did not do that. He did not have the courage of whatever the reason. Just think about it. His family has to go through all kinds of disgrace. This man has to be behind bars. All kinds of difficulties. Why? Because he knew what he was doing was wrong, but he could not really just have the courage to say no. So that is where the problem coming in. So we started off with the contemporary confession of Ramalinga Raju. Here the historical, confession. Those who are indulging in all kinds of corrupt practices, especially the white-collar crime. Our focus is white-collar crime only. It's not the petty, things right here and there. We are not really just worried it's a white-collar crime. Amazingly brilliant people. Amazingly brilliant people. They knew what they are doing, and unfortunately, the problem is they are afflicted with Duryodhana syndrome. What is right even if no one is doing it. What is wrong even if everyone is doing it. What is right even if no one is doing it. What is wrong even if everyone is doing it. One of the justifications people always give is everyone is doing it. Everyone is doing it. Right? So that is what the justification they give. If I stop, would the country turn into an amazing place? So that's a question. Especially, when I'm addressing the young students, obviously they don't accept any of the things that I say. Right? These are all, these things will not work. No work experience. No work experience. Because the models they see before them is different. But my job is to really just give them this. I only tell, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the line, if you pause for a moment and think about ethics, my teaching, the purpose of my teaching is served. My purpose of teaching is served. It is not here and now. It is not for getting placed. Because, we work in a system where placement is paramount. And it is not for that. But somewhere down the line, if you pause and think about ethics, I just give a time interval 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the line, the purpose is served. I had a student in Manipal who used to argue in every class of mine, brilliant guy, topper, one of the toppers of the batch. He will say, this will not work, Delhi, Stephanian, all kinds of background. And he will always say, brilliant guy. Then I was in Facebook at that time, he was also there, and he started his own thing, and then he said, in one of the things he made a comment. One was be honest and transparent in dealing things. This is what I learned in my 4 years of work life. Then I wrote him back. Now it is not 5 years for you, in 4 years itself you recognize that. It is required. It is required. Then he said, sir, but I was arguing with you, but I was never a batch student. I was never a batch student. He was a good student. He was one of the toppers. Anyway, what is right, even if no one is doing it. What is wrong, even if everyone is doing it. It's an unknown source. It's an unknown source. Happy journey. Thanks a lot for your opportunity. I'm so humble, so privileged. to just make this short presentation. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yeah.
How do you do that? You do it aggressively or and you say any common
Actually, there is no common. Yeah. See, honestly, unless the person concerned is value-based, yes, strict rules, regulations will help to some extent. For instance, after Enron, so please tell me. After Enron, WorldCom, Tyco, all those corporate scams happened in early 2000. In response to that, Sarbanes-Oxley Act had come. Bush administration came out with Sarbanes-Oxley Act, we call SOX. SEC, Securities Exchange Commission of US, very tough watchdog. Very tough watchdog. SEBI is in line with in terms of constitution and all that. Very tough watchdog. That's where I said people like Rajat Gupta could go behind bars in US, right? But very strict regulations, everything is there. But can we ensure ethical behavior? That's the question. Can we ensure ethical behavior? We always say the simple definition of ethics is nothing but law plus. The legal framework cannot simply arrest unethical behavior. Especially in countries like India, you bring out a legal framework, but then it is laid by decay. We always find loopholes and all that, unless people on their own volition, on their own conviction, if they don't really just do it, there is no way we can really just do anything about it. If somebody is brilliant enough, he wants to cut corners, do something, obviously he's going to do it. It is not the punitive action, the punishment that is going to be a deterrent. Yes, if it happens immediately, it will act as a deterrent. But ultimately, every country, every society, for instance, we talk about Middle East, harsh punishments are there. Do you think nothing is happening there? Also, the degree varies. Degree varies. That is where we are focusing on values. That is where we are focusing on values. Strong foundation. Even in the most corrupt department, that's where I gave you the two examples. Yeah.
Many people have different viewpoints of demands according to their environment. So there is always what may be done to one person, the other is.
Yeah.
So, and there is a common law.
Yeah.
And they find it difficult to stick to that common
Yeah.
law. Because something should be done to bring them into this.
See, this brings to the idea of context, right? When we discuss about ethics, we can't take away the context. The context is very important. We need to actually see the context. One we are just talking about is in a battlefield. If I kill the enemy, what will I get? I'll get all kinds of appreciation, gallantry, award, all kinds of things. If I just kill my next door neighbor, I will be behind bars. The context is different, right? Both are taking away life. The context is important. We need to really just look at the context also. That is where the victim, we have just brought in the victim syndrome. At times victim, we are all, victim of the situation. I need to really just look, which is overall. That is where the theory of greater good for greater number is also coming in. At times we need to really just see that, whether this action of mine bringing in greater good for greater people, that we need to actually look at.
Moreover, in the
there are situations. Accounting in commerce is very complex. And it is not known to everybody. So people make mistakes or fraud. It is very difficult to find out, and it becomes very complex.
Yeah.
That's how bad the mistakes are thing.
Yeah.
And they may not be knowing it's a fraud. That's all I think. Because
So
every time the law changes.
I feel that many a times those who are indulging in, they knew about it. It is not out of ignorance. So they are brilliant people. They knew what they were doing. So that part, we are talking about, it is not, a clerk or accounting assistant. We are talking fairly at a senior position, right? Highly qualified people. The problem is not with ordinary people. It is the problem with the clerk. So that way, many a times they knew what they were doing. Unfortunately, because of greed or something else, or they are not able to really, resist. They are not able to resist the temptation of the bosses. Not just their temptation, the temptation of the bosses. They are forcing us to do.
I read one case study that said that even people in the top are being compelled by their bosses and like that. And they are unable to overcome it.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I
It
just
also happens. It's not happening.
Yeah. One example that immediately comes to my mind is
I meant that as well.
yeah.
You always people make compulsive mistakes. They are being
Close to. Yeah. How do I really just manage this? Hiten Baya was a member of Planning Commission and he was also director of the firm of Anand Kalkata. One of the books relating to management of power that edited by Professor S.K. Chakraborty, he just wrote a piece. Managing power in government organizations. He was actually heading Hindustan Steel at that time. Later on it became SAIL and all that. One of the plans when he mentioned about this particular incident where the steel minister was visiting his plant. And he said, my wife is also accompanying and she wants to do some shopping. Would you mind sending your wife? It's a normal courtesy. And his wife took the wife of the minister to some shopping, some shop. And wife of this minister bought some sarees. And he said, those days no credit card, nothing. I'll just take this and so and so. And this lady, wife of Hiten Baya also there, she is the minister's wife. And she said, on going back to Delhi, I'll send you the money. And this shopkeeper was waiting, 2 months gone, no check was coming in. Then the shopkeeper asked Hiten Baya's wife, then Hiten Baya's wife asked her husband, you only asked me to accompany, this is what is happening. Then Hiten Baya said, why didn't you call the wife and ask? When Hiten Baya's wife was calling the minister's wife and asking for money, then after a while, the sarees were returned. Sarees were returned. Apparently, they used a couple of them or whatever. They simply returned not. The check did not come, the sarees returned. He said, the indication is, my wife will go for shopping, take care. What will I do? And he said, this is the way when these things are insisted upon, things change differently. Another situation was, he said the minister was amazingly decent person. I was called and I went to his home office. I went there. The minister excused himself and the party treasurer came and sat on the minister's seat. And then he said, election is round the corner and give a list, laundry list of contractors' names. Please take care. And this man left, disappeared. Hiten Baya waited for a couple of minutes, he got his briefing, he came out. He said that it's very difficult. And one more, in Powergrid we were training, one of the managers was saying his plan was there, not Powergrid, GAIL, Gas Authority of India Limited, the plan was there in Western UP. And this man was eligible for, at that time, Maruti ST. That was a big car, right? And deliberately he did not go for Maruti ST, he was just going with Ambassador car. We asked him why. He said, if I go for Maruti esteem. Whenever any politician visits, he will ask my esteem. Esteem car, what will happen to my esteem? So let me just go with ambassador. It's at times, these kind of things are very, very difficult. We need to. He said, I sacrifice my comfort. I sacrifice my comfort. That is how people do. We went to Tata Chemicals. I'm sorry, sir. I'm going to give you one more example. In some context, we went to Tata Chemicals plant in Western UP. There was Babrali or some place. It's a chemical fertilizer plant. We went there. We were staying in a guest house, and the food was served. My colleague is a Bengali, so obviously he would love to have fish or chicken or whatever. And they said they serve only vegetarian food. We stayed in other guest houses of Tatas. Their non-vegetarian food was served. Here, we were curious and we asked the plant head why no non-vegetarian is served. It was a no man land. We stick to vegetarian. This is how to manage this kind of thing. What happens is all the politicians, everyone will ask for our guest house. We can't say no because we need to manage the local ecosystem. We need to provide the guest house for some minister who is visiting whenever we are visiting. See, when we allow non-vegetarian food, they will bring something else to complement non-vegetarian food. Right? To complement that they might. So he said, so to avoid all that, he simply said this plan will serve only vegetarian food. So how to imaginatively managing. At times we need to do that. That's what they said, these are some of my responses here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much once again for the opportunity. It was a great pleasure. Thank you very much.
Om Shri Sai Ram. Offering my humble pranams at Bhagwan's lotus feet. Let me take this opportunity, sir, to thank you very much for your illustrative speech, again on enduring values. In fact, it was really for us, opening for us, I would say, whatever we learned from Bhagwan, we had to just invite them as such. Thank you very much for your illustrative speech. I think the examples. Let me now invite Sri Krishnan, Senior Partner, Vijay Raghavan and Associates, to honor the speaker. I have another two announcements to make. One is on the 16th of February, that is Sunday, between 10 to 12:30 we have the first anniversary celebrations of the CA Study Circle. We will have two speakers. One would be Mr. Sri V. Ranganathan from Ernst & Young, and the second speaker would be Mr. Bhupati, who would be the former president of CA Institute. We request all of you to kindly be present on the 16th February, Sunday between 10 and 12:30. Apart from that, we additionally have tomorrow a guest speaker from, Mr. Sanjay Sahani, who is again an alumnus of the Institute, plus he is also currently the controller of examinations from Sri Sathya Institute of Higher Learning. In fact, he has been a student of Bhagwan from 1982 to 87 with an integrated course. Apart from that, he is a gold medalist and he has been a warden of the Institute, and he currently holds a lot of senior responsibility in the Institute. So we have a Samarpan program tomorrow in Sundaram, tomorrow evening by 5:30 p.m., 4:30 p.m. We request you to be kindly present for the program as well. Sai Raman, thank you. Have the Mangala Arati.
This is the story of a house that has journeyed across 5 decades. A journey of struggle, adventure, passion and achievement. A journey from a local name to global fame. Sri Krishna Sweets, founded by Amuda Semmal, Sri Mahadevayar, is known for its melting magic, the divine Mysore Pa, a delicacy loved by one and all in India and abroad. Even before the phrase corporate social responsibility gained significance, it was textured into the group's value systems. And today, this phrase has been redefined by Mr. Murali as citizen social responsibility. Chennai 365, an effort by SKS in association with social, sports and cultural bodies to do good to a vibrant Chennai. To Sri Krishna Sweets, it's no mere rule. It's not just an act. It's every citizen's social responsibility. After all, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. And in the process, create a world where life's best bonds are built with love and care. And in time, they will become our strongest bond.